think we can start. Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. We are happy to see you on online consultations hosted by Green Growth Knowledge Partnerships, GGKP, and dedicated to outreach, stakeholders engagement, and public awareness raising in connection with national implementation plans. And these consultations are arranged as a part of outreach assistance to countries, which should be provided by GGKP under GEF 10785 project. And furthermore, GGKP is developing 6 regional outreach strategies, which countries would be able to practically use, and if they find it necessary, partially integrate some action items in their action plans when developing and implementing their NIPs, and planning their outreach activities to raise awareness on POPs and improve collaboration with the private sector when collecting the data and developing inventories. During this consultation, we would be able to share the status of current work on strategy development and the schedule, run a couple of surveys to collect inputs from our participants, from our countries, and also to have a discussion about current challenges in outreach and stakeholders engagement, existing practices, and if you have successful or any practices you would like to share with us, please feel free to raise your hand and share this with us during this discussion. This event would be conducted with participation of the following countries: Albania, Algeria, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Burundi, Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Gambia, Guinea, Malawi, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Senegal, Togo, Tunisia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Welcome everyone here. And we are recording this consultation and will later circulate the meeting minutes and summaries of this session to all the participants. And during this session, we are providing the interpretation to French, so feel free to click the interpretation button in the bottom of your screen. It looks like a globe icon, and please feel free to select French, Spanish if you need French interpretation. And upon our consultations with regional centers, we have been informed that a couple of countries would like to share with us today. And as far as I know, this is Cameroon, and we also have teams from Bosnia and Herzegovina and teams from North Macedonia. Thank you very much for your active participation and willingness to share. We're really happy to see everyone. And this is actually a great honor for us to meet online in this meeting, not in the webinar, so we can see each other, we can speak. We greatly appreciate your feedback, and we would really happy to hear from you and engage in discussion. My colleague Stephanie Widerini, who is communications coordinator working on the outreach strategies for the countries, would lead the main session today. And before I start, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Suman Sharma, Program Officer from BRS Secretariat, to open this session with a couple of remarks on behalf of Stockholm Convention. Floor is yours, Suman.
Thank you, Anastasia, and good afternoon. I guess it is good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, it's very nice to participate. At least I would like to listen what the discussions are and what are the feelings that the participants, the countries, the regional centers are having at the ground while implementing or developing, updating their NIPs. So this is an opportunity, and I would like to thank GGKP, especially Anastasia, for inviting us. My name is Suman Sharma. I work for this BRS Secretariat now, but before I used to work for the Stockholm Secretariat. And I am responsible for the transmission of NIPs and technical assistance related with the Stockholm Convention. So this is, the area of my portfolio, what you are discussing and what you are talking about. And I do not have much thing to say. As I said, I want to hear more than what I say. But then the topic just, it gave me the point that I should bring. I'm sure that you all know about that. the Secretariat does develop. It is not the Secretariat, it is the parties. It is the Conference of the Parties ask Secretariat to develop the draft guidances, and these draft guidances are presented to the Conference of the Parties, and parties they accept it, or they take note of it, and then they ask parties to provide comments, feedback to make those guidances more user friendly. And then this is the process that has been adopted in the Stockholm Convention for quite some time. So every time we do the initial set of guidances presented to the COP, and then COP keeps asking parties to provide feedback. And there is one such guidance that is about this discussion, that is called socioeconomic guidance. That socioeconomic assessment guidance was developed in 2007 to address one of the provision under the Article 7. Article 7 is about developing and updating NEP, and that article also talks about how that NEP should be developed, who should be involved in developing such NEP, and who should not be left out, who should be taken more seriously, the concerns while developing the NEP. And that NEP should not be a standalone document of the country, but then should be the part of bigger sustainable development strategy. So that becomes a country's plan, not only the Stockholm plan, not only to deal with the chemical management, but becomes the part of a bigger plan. So that's the idea. And this guidance was developed and was used. Let me tell you that before joining the Secretariat, I used to work for my government in my country, and I was the one who was involved in developing my NEP, my country's NEP. Then what had happened was this guidance was not there, so we didn't really do the stakeholder analysis, going to the different stakeholders, private sectors, the NGOs. We didn't do that. We just went to different government agencies, those who were having relevant kind of Ministry of Energy for PCB, where the transformer would be, or Ministry of Agriculture where the pesticide would be. So we did that kind of thing, but we did not really go into the deep inside. Now, since we have since 2007 the socioeconomic guidance, that guidance was there were comments from parties saying that the guidance is not quite user friendly, so it needs to be updated, and there were several comments received from different countries, and those comments, and in 2017, with the support from the European Union, we updated that guidance. We engaged a consultant who took who looked into the comments and then reflected what was said in comments to update the new guidance, So this guidance is available in the convention website. I'm sure you must have used it while developing your national implementation plan. With this, I stop here, and I would like to hear more from you. Thank you, Anastasia, and floor is up to you.
Thank you very much, Suman. And in a while, I will share the link to the guidance with the participants in the chat so that we are all on the same page. And I will then introduce my colleague, Stephanie Widerini, who is working on development of 6 regional outreach strategies for the countries, and she will provide a quick presentation. Over to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Anastasia. And welcome to all our colleagues from the parties, from country representatives. Thank you so much for sparing your time to attend this consultation. So I'm Stephanie Widerini. I'm working with Anastasia for the component 4 together with GGKP. We are working currently on developing the strategy for outreach and engagement with major stakeholder groups, particularly in the development of national implementation plans. And you've heard also from Suman earlier, thank you so much for highlighting the importance of these elements, because we've been looking for something as a reference of a benchmark or something that may help us in engaging with the relevant stakeholders, not just the government, because without other elements, with other stakeholders, I think all the planning in terms of developing the inventory, data collection, and reviewing and updating the NIPs won't be made possible. So today, on the agenda items, we would like to give an overview of the outreach and stakeholder engagement, and we will then have a discussion on envision consultation process and outputs. We will share with you the plans and the expected timeline and the outputs from this consultation, what is the next step, and what is it that we will expect for all of us to see and then distribute to all of us to help us in the development of NIPs for each country. And today we will also try to get your inputs to hear your ideas and your difficulties and your challenges, as well as best practices, so that we can integrate all of these points into the draft, and then we will close that. So what are the key objectives of today's consultation? First of all, of course, to receive inputs from the country's perspectives and gather information relevant to your national context in terms of mapping and facilitating engagement with the relevant stakeholders, particularly to get accurate data for the inventory and the development of NIPs. Second point is to do a baseline assessment and improvements. So we will review and assess how the current state of your process of outreach and information dissemination for POPs that can be further enhanced, and so that we will be able to comply with your obligation and under Stockholm Convention, particularly focus on innovative and enhanced means of implementation. But we are focused also on capacity building, enhancing the human capacities in this that we often see as challenges, and we don't have sufficient knowledge on this matter. And on the third point, of course, we would like to use this opportunity to have a knowledge sharing across different countries. So this will be a peer-to-peer learning and sharing, so that we can hear what other countries are facing in terms of challenges and what are the good practices in terms of outreach and information dissemination. And then what are the timelines like? First, the outline of the strategy document has been prepared, and we will show you in a minute, and the skeleton. And now this month we are running 3 different sessions of consultation. We've done already 2 sessions on Tuesday with group 1 and group 2, and it was very well attended. And today we are happy to have your participation, and it's really well attended as well. So the next will be circulating the minutes of this consultation meeting to all of you, so that that can be a reference. Then also we will also invite you to share your best practice from project countries, then to be collected and to be included onto the draft. So we will use case studies as illustration that can be practically learned by other countries. So the expectation to have your inputs also by September, other than what we are hearing from today. And we will also draft the strategy document by December. And that strategy document will consist of 6 different regional strategies, consisting of each country profiles, particularly on the state of outreach, information dissemination, and stakeholder engagement, and particularly focus on the public awareness campaign that is also mandatory or obligation under Article 10. So in December, we will compile and then we will circulate the draft for your review, particularly on the country profile. In January, we will hear back from you for further feedback and collect it for the revision. And by February, we would expect to disseminate the strategy to all project countries. So the question is why this matters, and we heard already very clearly from Suman in the opening intervention, without which is basically it's a little challenging to make sure that it's all smooth and to make sure that the development is done properly. First, there is the international context as to why this is important. There is a need for tools to support parties that was not in existence before, and try to conduct outreach and consultation with stakeholders, especially the private sector, as users of POPs, and to ensure their participation in the management of POPs. And provision of specific guidance, which is user-friendly and easy to navigate around, and then also to be localized or contextualized as per your own local context and country context. And then assistance for dissemination, outreach, and private sector engagement, as well as the compilation of examples of knowledge management and information sharing strategies. On the national context, this is an obligation of parties as per the Stockholm Convention, following each of COP contexts. And the country's success in developing, reviewing, and updating NIPs requires an effective means to engage with wider group of stakeholders. So one key element that Suman also emphasized earlier, to make sure these will have to be integrated into a bigger picture strategy. And secondly, I think this was mentioned by the first two groups and all other colleagues on different countries. One of the challenges normally that can be also mentioned is different budget to manage POPs. So it will be highly encouraged to allocate budget to consider running the activities under stakeholder engagement and outreach, both with relevant stakeholders, private sectors, NGOs, etc., and the public. And we would encourage to include this element to your action plan. So the context itself, when we're talking about stakeholder engagement, what is it? What is it engagement refers to? That refers to the approach to gather input or contribution from stakeholders towards NIP inventory and development of action plan implementation or dissemination, or monitoring and evaluation of NIPS update. So stakeholder engagement, we will see later the list of relevant stakeholders that you may or have already been engaged with. And maybe there are other lists of engagement with other stakeholders we may miss on the ground that you would like to propose as well. And then second context, we look at outreach. The outreach itself encompasses a range of activities conducted by individuals and organizations to raise awareness about an issue, in this case is POPs, and encourage others to engage in promoting it. And this process includes educating relevant stakeholders about the problem to spark their interest in spreading awareness. So in this case, we're talking about capacity buildings and then opportunities to run trainings and to participate in different sets of consultation, regular feedback, monitoring, etc. with those stakeholders. And then the next context is, of course, public awareness. One of the key party obligations under Article 10 of Stockholm Convention is to educate the public on the danger of POPs to their health and the environment. It is critical to create a strategy that aimed at increasing public awareness coupled with the proposed action plan and performance indicator by working together with the executing agencies and responsible ministries as well. So public awareness, that refers to process of educating general public and raising understanding of potential risk and harms and minimizing the exposure to POPs. So what's the strategy outline like that we laid earlier? First, the introduction to the matter, followed by why it matters in the two contexts, international and the national context. The methodology that we've been utilizing, most of it is actually monitoring and learning and looking at all the NIPS report you have submitted, as well as all other wider desk research, on top of the consultation process we are currently running. And then country profiles and regional summary will be accompanying the draft strategy. And then the objectives of the strategy itself. What is engagement in the context of NIPS, and who are the stakeholders that is expected to be involved in the process? And how we will achieve our core objectives that will include dissemination and outreach, stakeholder engagement, public awareness, and the key messages that we can use to do so. And last but not least, best practices, case studies from project countries that illustrate how we can really make it as a practice on the ground. So when we're talking about challenges, there are lots of different barriers facing different countries at a time. So these are all the lists that we compile from different documentation that your countries have probably participated in, as well as the feedback for the past few months that we gathered from some of you. Thank you very much for your inputs as well. Both are those. First, the general lack of awareness of POPs and their danger among decision makers as well as other stakeholders. Lack of common information platforms and lack of legislative framework dictating the standards for information sharing. So the legislative framework that should be the foundation of executing this development as well. That is missing, so everything is not really going to plan. Lack of active engagement, poor cooperation and coordination among relevant stakeholders. Not only that, but also insufficient human and financial resources for outreach to a large number of stakeholders, and lack of capacity and resource to monitor compliance at border entry points and to identify and test chemicals. So this is particularly relevant for trade, and we have received this particular challenge from some of the countries that are participating in our project at the moment. And in relation to that, there is also lack or limited access to training for custom officers, and in some cases, not enough human resources for effective custom control, and no capacity building opportunities in this regard. There is also lack or limited coordination among different key government actors, and challenges building and retaining a capable team due to frequent changes or rotation. So in terms of national focal points, so there has been also issues that was proposed by some countries in the earlier consultation, that it happens every 4 to 6 months. That is basically a barrier to continuity and sustainability of making sure the reporting mechanism is going smoothly. And then the next one is low level of trust from the industry in government action on POPs, particularly on chemicals management in general. So this perhaps can be addressed, some of which is through disclosure on how to handle sensitive data to really grow trust and to have a regular contribution and feedback mechanism across different stakeholders. So there should be a transparency on all different areas. Limited or no disclosure about industrial operation, which impedes proactive action on potential pollution, and limited or no financial resources allocated by industry for environmental protection. And challenges go on from language barriers to inclusivity assurance and outreach to relevant multi-stakeholders, absence of local approach with community. So basically, there is different language from what was adapted from the global approach to the local context, insufficient availability and access to information on POPs to the public, poor communication and internet penetration, mobile phone to facilitate information sharing, and lack of cooperation and networking with the regional and global POP research community. And to address all these challenges, what is the expected key enablers that may help increase stakeholder engagement? First, we can look at garnering stakeholders' buy-in, because the outreach and engagement efforts require an ongoing cumulative process to enable this kind of relationship. The starting point is to make sure there is the support from different and across stakeholders. And second, increase understanding of environmental challenges and human health, and share responsibilities across multi-stakeholder. Then we can raise national awareness of the Stockholm Convention and new POPs, build country ownership among national governments and other stakeholders. So it's not just across the government agencies, but also other relevant stakeholders. Support collaborative efforts, particularly with the private sector, while ensuring confidentiality. And this has to be made clear from the outset, and engaging with them at the very early stage, even before the inventory starts. Ensure provision of the reporting mechanism standards, to make sure that everybody knows what they're doing and how to easily navigate around, and with the right instruction and easy to understand. Support a collaborative reporting platform so that we have a standardized mechanism. Then we create and increase awareness through regular information dissemination, integrate global exchange and capacity building through the recently established global framework on chemicals, and integrate outreach strategy and action plans into the overall NIPS update strategy. So this key enablers has been listed on the guidance and on the inventory as part of the inventory and data collection with the private sector. And we had the chance to circulate across all the project countries. And thank you very much to provide all your positive feedback on that. And that will be distributed to you once the draft is finalized and ready. And when we're talking about relevant stakeholders, who are these people? So first, of course, the national government, who has responsibility tied to other relevant international and regional agreements, notably chemicals-related agreements, and then other relevant ministries and government agencies, for example, whoever responsible from the environment, finance, agriculture, industry, trade, transport, public health, labor, energy, waste disposal, and recycling fields ministry. But of course, when we're talking about outreach and engagement, we would also encourage you, if feasible, to also engage with the Ministry of Information and Communication. Government official responsible for the Rotterdam and Basel Convention or other relevant MEAs, and then producers and or importers, environmental authorities, chemical registration authorities, chemicals trade and association, and relevant industries. And next one is public interest non-government organization regarding chemicals and waste, relevant environmental nature conservation organization, academic, social organization, women's groups, and others. International Environment Organization to provide guidance and assistance, science community, relevant research and education institution, as well as consumer. But of course, also not less important than all of these is the general public. So to develop, review, and update all the implement an effective and successful NIPS, all this wide range of stakeholders must be involved and engaged in the process. And there is also general guidance on POP inventory and detailed inventory guidance document contain list of suggested stakeholders. And for the outreach itself, what does it give us and how do we leverage? And first, it allows for communication of risk from hazardous chemicals through labeling, printed information education. It provides public access to information about hazardous chemicals and associated risk, and of course, facilitate the exchange of information between agencies, governments, and sectors of industry, as well as other stakeholders. On public awareness points, it will be required to generate awareness about POPs and their impact on human health, because of course, one of the key information that the public is really keen to learn is about their health and how that affects their day-to-day life and their future health among the exposed audience and the wider public. To influence behavior towards minimizing the propagation and exposure of POPs among the exposed audience, because with this change of behavior, that will also help in pushing the market and by consumer demands, and that may help in the equation of pushing the private sector as well, to communicate alternatives and potential solution whenever applicable, and to engage audience in a movement towards minimizing the use of POPs and POPs containing articles that may influence the business sector production. So interaction with stakeholders, what does it entail? The following interaction is actually assumed throughout and after NIP development and review, as well as update for POPs management. Contacting relevant stakeholders to collect the POPs data, to share the data, to validate the data, and to obtain feedback. So all this will require contact with relevant stakeholders, and then there will be an intervention on awareness raising, as well as educational intervention that may include educational in school from the early age. And then contacting stakeholders during inventory development. As we know, there are three-tier approach and in terms of collecting inventory. So collecting inventory related data is a multi-step process. Include this tier-based approach that lay out the steps in engaging stakeholders to retrieve the required information from the industry. So stakeholders should be contacted early in the process during the development of POPs inventories, so their input can be considered thoroughly, helping to tailor the inventory process to address local concern and needs effectively. So effective stakeholders communication involves clear, concise, and honest exchanges to gather diverse insights and foster cooperation. For example, on the first tier, we inform stakeholders about the scope of inventory and the background of the Stockholm Convention, and then communicating the arrangement for treatment and confidential business information. On the tier 2, we contact stakeholders for data collection through interviews, surveys, and site visits. Likewise, on the third tier, when the in-depth inventory could include using analytical methods, we also contact them through interviews, surveys, site visits, as well as obtaining their feedback to and/or validate the data. And contacting stakeholders after inventory process. During the action plan, we contact stakeholders for information sharing, resource allocation, and stakeholder engagement. During the implementation of NIPS, we do the outreach to stakeholders for information sharing through the CAP study, which is knowledge, attitude, and practices. And then baseline surveys, awareness raising campaigns, and educational intervention. And lastly, monitoring and implementation of NIPS, we contact stakeholders to obtain feedback on the effectiveness of the plan. So this, we'd like to share with you the list of guidance, UNEP published guidance to be consulted for the process. And we will circulate also this presentation later on together with the meeting minutes for your reference. I think that's all, and we can jump to the discussion, and we would like to hear your perspective, your feedback, as well as your experience on the ground. Let me turn it back to you, Anastasia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. That was quite insightful. And let me launch our first poll. I hope everyone can see the poll on the screen and the questions. So we actually translated the poll into French as well, because we do have a number of countries from Africa who speak French. So I hope this is helpful. How important do you think stakeholder engagement and public awareness for outreach and information dissemination in the effort of NIPS review and update? So how important do you find the stakeholder engagement and public awareness for NIPS? And the options are extremely important, very important, moderately important, slightly important, or not important at all. So please feel free to answer the questions. And the second question is, what are the key challenges your organization is facing regarding your outreach and information dissemination efforts for developing, reviewing, and updating the NIPS? And we have tried to identify a couple of challenges, and some of them, as Stephanie mentioned, were collected from the countries who participated in our survey before. So it was identified that it could be a lack of knowledge or expertise, lack of financial resources, lack of common information platform, insufficient human resources, and unavailable dedicated personnel, unavailable standard operating procedures, lack of national coordination and engagement with relevant stakeholders, and limited access to training opportunities, or low level of trust from the business sector, especially, and insufficient public information on POPs, or lack of regional and global cooperation, or others. Please feel free to answer the questions. I think we do have 6 respondents so far. And it's very important to notice that during our last consultations with the Caribbean countries in Caribbean and Latin America, it was noticed that there is such a challenge which they called stakeholders fatigue, right, Stephanie?
That's
and
right, yeah.
It was quite interesting that also some of the, because that's the regional specifics of Caribbean and Latin America, some of the countries, they have very specific geographic locations. So going somewhere to other region, to the sites and meeting the stakeholders is already a challenge. So geographic location was also indicated as one of the challenges. So please feel free to answer the questions. And if you don't find your option of the answer in the proposed options, please feel free to drop your message in the chat, because we are recording the chat messages as well, and all of your messages will be considered when we develop the strategy. Okay, I think we have 12 out of 22 participants on the poll, 13 so far. So around 54% of participants today think that stakeholder engagement and public awareness for NIPS is very important, and 46 believe it's extremely important, which is great. It's quite the same as our other groups earlier. And among the challenges, 62% of people believe that it's insufficient human resources and unavailable dedicated personnel, which is quite similar to our other groups. And 57% also believe that it's lack of financial resources. And that's true because we've also discussed it during our previous consultations that sometimes it's not very clear where the financial resources may come from. And the colleagues who are working on NIPS and also develop the action plans and later have to implement the action plans, they normally sit in the Ministry of Environment or Ministries of Climate Change. And but the financial resources might be also probably allocated somewhere with the Ministry of Public Health, for example, or Ministry of ICT for this kind of campaign. So it's very important to ensure also the stakeholders' engagement on the level of the public agencies to make sure that maybe there is any way to allocate the budget for this from other ministries, if possible. Do you want to add anything, Stephanie?
Yes.
On the
So
results?
let's just maybe end the poll, and I've just entered it, and then sharing the results. And you can we can see the list of the challenges. The low level of trust is also coming at the top, as we've also expected. The low level of trust, particularly from the industry, causing limited disclosure. I believe this will cause inaccuracy in data collection. So that's why to really bring them in from the very beginning to gain their trust, it is not really a walk in the park. So this has to be done regularly and rigorously to make sure that they feel they are part of the effort overall. And of course, insufficient human resources and dedicated personnel, that is also lacking, that is mentioned here. There is others mentioned in the equation. I'm not sure if there is anyone who would like to share their perspective on what are others. I don't know if there is anything mentioned in the chat at all. Let me just
not yet in the
see.
chat, Stephanie.
Okay.
But I think we have a raised hand from the country.
Yeah, Jordana Popsimonova, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind presentation of the strategy. But in my opinion, first let me present myself. I've been working for 20 years, since 2004, at the POPS unit, the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning. I say 20 years because there were comings and goings in the meantime, but we started very early with the development of the National Implementation Plan. So if we had these questions at that time, probably the answers would have been totally different. My point would be that maybe we can disaggregate the questions concerning development of the National Implementation Plan and the ones that are addressed to further on upgrading and implementation of the action plans. Because when you start from a scratch, public awareness is very important. First, you make the public awareness, and then you approach the stakeholders. At least that was our experience. Because all of us were faced with something new. We all had to start studying what we were facing with the implementation of the Stockholm Convention, so that we first started with primary schools and public awareness, and then we contacted the stakeholders. Now what we have identified the stakeholders, because Macedonia is not producer of POPs. We are dealing only with import, unlegal import, because legally everything is already finished. Our colleagues from the Ministry of Environment has done excellent job in that respect. Now the situation is much more clearer, but maybe there are things, thanks to this strategy, that we can go deeper into. Was I clear?
Yes, I think it's really clear, and it's good to
the
hear.
main point is that there is difference between development when a country is starting from zero, and when we are talking about second or third, in this case, update of the NIP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordana. It's really, really clear and good to hear that you underlining the starting point, the understanding, the public awareness, and what it is, how is the danger, so people can understand better before we start from scratch and put your blindfold people wondering, what are you trying to achieve here? What are you trying to talk to us? Because we don't understand why we're doing all this. So the understanding to plan from the outset is really key. And I think we can definitely put that as an important reminder for us and during the strategy, that public awareness cannot be left, because that should be starting point for all of us, so that we don't ignore what is it that you're trying to instruct and what you're trying to communicate to all the stakeholders. Thank you very much for that, Jordana. It's very, very insightful. And I think we have another hand raised from Joshua Odu. Please, Joshua, if you would like to share. You're probably on mute if you're trying. Okay.
Okay. Bonjour à tout le monde. Oui, je vais intervenir pour le Cameroun et au nom de l'Afrique. Nous allons essayer de passer en revue ce que nous avons eu à faire dans le cadre du NIP 1, 2, avec le NIP qui est en cours, en ce qui concerne la sensibilisation, la communication, l'information du public sur les POP. Initialement, nous avons d'abord eu à mener un travail préalable pour identifier les acteurs ou bien les cibles auxquelles nous allons nous adresser. Et ces cibles, nous avons réparti en 4 grands groupes. Il y a donc les administrations, la société civile, la population et les industriels ou bien les structures qui font dans l'émission des POP, donc comme les dioxines et furanes. Après, dans cette phase d'identification des acteurs, nous nous sommes dit, mais quel est même réellement le besoin en communication de ces acteurs-là? Donc, nous sommes allés évaluer leurs besoins en communication, sensibilisation, pour connaître si ces acteurs, ces cibles connaissent déjà même ce que c'est les POP. Est-ce qu'ils peuvent identifier les POP? Est-ce qu'ils peuvent évaluer les risques liés à la gestion des POP? Est-ce qu'ils ont la capacité à tenir un registre ou bien des informations sur les POP? Est-ce qu'il y a des sources d'exposition aux POP? Voilà, après cette évaluation, nous sommes allés sur la proposition des alternatives. Parce qu'il ne faut pas dire que pop, mais il faut dire, mais comme on a interdit tel produit qui est maintenant pop, quelles sont les alternatives à ces différents pop? Donc, on a identifié donc les différentes alternatives au pop. Après, ça en est suivi donc la phase élaboration ou bien production des outils de communication, de sensibilisation. Et par là, lors de nos précédentes NIP, nous avons utilisé des sites web, des rencontres physiques pour échanger avec les parties prenantes, pour leur faire comprendre ce que c'est les POP, utiliser des outils plus attrayants comme les casquettes, les t-shirts, les polos, les brochures pour passer plus le message. Parce que quand vous passez une fois en face à face, souvent le message ne reste pas. Nous nous sommes dit il faut qu'il y ait des informations à longue durée. Donc, comme les banderoles, les roll-ups, les affiches, les calendriers, les agendas, les médias et autres, on a donc produit ce genre des outils pour pouvoir vulgariser, informer le public sur les POP, pour qu'ils aient connaissance de ces POP. Parce que jusqu'à aujourd'hui, le grand public même ne connaît pas ce que c'est les POP. Après, nous nous sommes dit, mais ayant ces documents, allons les vulgariser, allons diffuser ces informations. Donc, il y a donc l'organisation des campagnes de sensibilisation qu'on a menées dans les écoles, les universités. Aussi, nous avons travaillé avec les groupes de femmes pour susciter leur engagement en matière de gestion, surtout des pesticides, parce que dans nos pays, les femmes utilisent beaucoup de pesticides pour les cultures maraîchères. Et nous avons organisé aussi des réunions avec les administrations pour les édifier davantage sur les POP et comment contenir les informations. Parce que là, les administrations, ce sont elles qui détiennent beaucoup d'informations relatives au POP, mais elles ne savent pas comment les tenir et comment mettre à disposition le moment venu. Donc voilà l'approche méthodologique ou bien de la stratégie de communication, information, sensibilisation que nous avons eu à développer pendant nos différents NIP qu'on est en train de conduire, ou bien ce que nous avons eu aussi à conduire. Mais nous avons eu des contraintes dans l'exécution de ces stratégies, parmi lesquelles cette phase de communication ou bien de sensibilisation n'ont été menées que pour l'élaboration du NIP. Une fois le NIP validé, soumis au secrétariat, les activités de sensibilisation ne suivent plus, faute de moyens. Donc, et c'est ce qui justifie aujourd'hui la difficulté à accéder à certaines informations pendant la phase d'inventaire. Parce que les structures disent que cette information ne met pas utile. Pourquoi moi je dois tenir cela? Même au niveau de l'Institut des statistiques, ce n'est pas dans le canevas NIP que l'Institut tient ses informations. Donc, ça, c'est un grand challenge à mener et nous pensons que nous devrons revoir peut-être notre stratégie de communication et d'information pour que l'objectif commun qui est la production des données soit la chose la mieux partagée de tous et que nous puissions aisément produire le NIP lorsque des nouveaux POP sont ajoutés aux annexes de la Convention. Je ne voudrais pas être long sur mes propos, mais voilà l'expérience que je voudrais partager avec vous. Merci.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. And I think it's pretty clear there has been stages that you basically laid out there, and good that you've started the preparatory already with your key actors to be included from administration, civil society, of course, the public and industrial awareness to really sensitize and to make them realize, to socialize what it is important, what they need to do, to really learn the situation with them, the baseline assessment. And I think in the chat is also mentioned about the importance of stakeholder mapping. That is really key. And that needs to be updated every now and then because things have changed, things develop depending on which stages you are at. So this cannot stop only on the first stage. Then the more you basically gather information, the more you act it, the more you implement, the more you need to engage and then to include all the relevant stakeholders, more even than the first stage. And then you have also identified all these. And also during the process, you said that there is a difficulties in you understand the public awareness importance, but there is the difficulties in the execution itself, and to make sure that all the materials speak to the public. So this is the area where we might want to look at and step back. How do we make sure that this speaks the language of the people, this speaks the language of the audience? So I think there is a gap. So yet again, we're going back to stakeholder engagement in public awareness, developing all the materials and the comms materials, which stakeholders we would need to bring in, those who can really create a story, create a narrative for the people to learn, not just in school, and then the way Jordana mentioned earlier from the Macedonia, and then from the public awareness, who can actually speak and create the products for people to understand with the right messaging, not the scientific language, but how can we actually transform this to the people. And thank you also to share your constraints in execution. And it's very useful for us that there is a gap between the strategy and the execution. How do we actually make it in real life? And there is always difficulties in that regard. But yes, thank you so much for all these points. We've made a note on that. And there is another hand raised from Melina. Please, yeah, your floor.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great. My name is Melina Djajic-Valjevac. I'm coming from Bosnia-Herzegovina. Actually, I'm coming from the private company, Enova, which was engaged in first development of NIP. And the first preliminary inventory done in 2012 until 2015. It took 3 years for that project, since that project also included the raising awareness part. And then after that, another project, I was also involved in another inventory assessment. during 2021-22, during Corona time, where then that was more detailed inventory done. Thank you, Katarina, to invite us here. First of all, it was really a great opportunity to exchange our knowledge with you. First of all, yes, as Katarina already mentioned in her comment, yes, we had a stakeholder map developed also during the first NIP development, and now in 2021-22, we had opportunity to make more, to add more stakeholders on those maps. It is very important to divide for which divide stakeholders that we will that are somehow under the risk from POPs, such as industries, and where we can get some data for our inventories. And it was very important that to divide all stakeholders according to the type of POPs that we could find there, in a way to avoid a situation where we are going to ask some stakeholders several times to send us some data. What was we at the very beginning, we saw that very large questionnaires are not so good. Also, if we add a lot of technical data there, no one will answer you. Questionnaire should be not more than 1 page, really. And it is good that when we ask for some POPs, let's say PCB equipment or similar, not to really ask, do you have a PCB equipment, but to ask, do you have transformers or capacitors older than some year? Because if you ask someone, do you have that kind of equipment, again, they will say no. One of the challenge that we could add on your list is also a lack of the legislation, that different industries still has to have some obligations according to law. It would be good to have to make their own inspections in their industries, and to inform authorities about PCB equipment. What else? Yeah, it is very good to involve a Chamber of Commerce, because at the very beginning of the inventory, first stage is when you think about industrial sectors where you could find this kind of POPs. And it is then another step is to ask Chamber of Commerce to make a list of the of all industries that inside of that industrial sectors, and especially if they know among of all industries if they are some old industries, you know, where working that could possibly have those POPs. I don't know, for example, for new POPs is also very important to have a Chamber of Commerce at your side, also included in a development of NIP, and also to frequently participate on their meetings, because Every chamber of commerce, I guess, in every country has their own associations, and that is also a very good opportunity to, from time to time, participate on their general meeting, and to have a small 15 minutes presentation explaining that we have some new chemicals inside of Stockholm Convention and something like that. So, for example, for PFOS, our very important stakeholder was airports. So we visit every airport and have meeting with them to explain them what kind of risk they have if they have, PFOS firefighting foams. And also, very important stakeholder there is military. It's very hard to approach to their data, I guess, but military usually have this kind of firefighting forms since it's very old. Well, that's something that I put here aside on my notes. So here is also my colleague Maya, and also I guess Azra. She's a focal point for Bosnia-Herzegovina, if they have something more to add.
Thank you, Melina from Bosnia and Herzegovina. I don't know if there is anyone who would like to add on top of what Melina has shared.
Hello. My name is Maya. I'm Melina's colleague, and I was also engaged. I was leading actually the preparation of the Bosnia and Herzegovina's first NIP. I would just like to, I agree with all that Melina said. I would just like to add that during development of our first NIP, we did really comprehensive stakeholder mapping, which, as Melina already explained, was updated during the second project, during the second inventory, and now also the third time during this NIP update project. So me and Melina are engaged by the RESETOX as Bosnia and Herzegovina experts to help in updating the previous NIP. During the first NIP, it was the project that lasted for almost 3 years. We had a lot of meetings and a lot of workshops where we invited all various stakeholders, all of the categories that were listed in your presentation, which means industry, academia, universities, NGOs, institutions, all were invited. And we usually had like an inception workshop where we explained all about POPs, about the convention, about the risks, about the importance of development of a national implementation plan, and introduce them with these activities. Then we had another workshop after the inventory where we explained what we found on the field and asked for their confirmation. Then the third one was during the prioritization of the activities that will be included in the action plan. And the last one was when actually the draft NIP was prepared to present them action plans. We also had several working groups consisted of the representatives of stakeholders, which I mentioned before. We had groups for monitoring of PCBs. We had a group of for POPs pesticides, for PCBs, for new POPs. And this group was, we were in contact with this group, and it facilitated exchange of information and collection of information. One challenge that I would add to what Melina already said was that from some stakeholders, we received a very low response on our questionnaires. And we recognized the need for a stronger involvement of the responsible ministries, because even though we had letters from the ministries confirming their participation in the project, we still got low response in terms of the stakeholders used to tell us why we should give you the information. We are not obliged to give you information, and this is where this lack of legislation really steps in, because very low percentage of stakeholders were really aware of the Stockholm Convention and the risks of the chemicals under this list. But really, we need to work more harder on raising awareness of the stakeholders in terms of their understanding of the importance of giving us the information. Also, when there is no penalties and legal obligation within the country's legislation, they don't feel like they owe us anything to give us information, you know. Yeah, that would be it.
Thank you so much. It's all very important points raised from Bosnia-Herzegovina's perspective. Before we move on to the next discussion, let me just make sure that everything is recorded here also, because it's really critical. One of the suggestions that Melina earlier mentioned is the involvement of the Chamber of Commerce, especially in, of course, to make list of all industries, existing industries, should it be an old one and the new one once the new POP is announced, and to really keep up with all developments, because of course Chamber of Commerce has its own association, has representatives from all other different sectors, and the frequent participation in their meeting, so that is actually assimilated. That is also good to gain understanding and the trust and good relationship with them. So whenever there is information from both sides, it's exchanged at the right time, at the right moment, with the amount of information required. And also taking the example of PFOS, the role of the information from military, that can be tricky indeed. But we will see how to get around that, especially with the role of the government and the authority in that regard. That is actually further emphasized by Maya on the role of a more empowering role from the governments. So not just from the binding legislation, so there is obligation for the industry to provide information, regardless that actually they understand there is the Stockholm Convention, there is a risk, and especially if they're actually exposed to the audience and the public. But so long as there is no legal obligation, there has no empowerment, there's no authority that makes it like, okay, you have to really provide this information. So why it matters? Why do we have to be listening to what requirements? Also, again, simplifying the questionnaire so people can have as efficiently filling up the required information, and the more efficient questions, as in rather than a generic questions, that can be a more specified and straightforward in a simplified manner, so that the engagement can be better. So I guess that's the overall message. I don't know if you want to add anything, Maya. You raise your hand again, and I will move to Azra after this.
Yes, I just remembered that I missed. This is something that we were discussing during the inception workshop of the NIP update, which was held in June here in Bosnia and Herzegovina. One of the important things is to find the financial resources for phasing out of PCB equipment, because some of the stakeholders that we contacted and were inventoried, they possess, for example, PCB containing equipment, which is actually still in use. However, due to lack of financial resources and funds for replacing this equipment, they are just keeping it, although they are aware that it should be replaced by 2025. So basically, the one important thing in NIP update process is to facilitate the information about the available funding for this kind of activities. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Of course, funding is really key, and without which there's no execution that can be done. Thank you so much for adding that point. And Azra, please take the floor.
Do you hear me? Good afternoon, everybody from Sarajevo. I hope you can hear me. Just on top of what has been said by Maya and Melina, yeah, I'm really happy that we really have also for NIP update this great team in place. And as you can see, we mostly were working our NIP based on a tier 2 and 3 practically. We did a lot of site visits, and that's most important, that the provider of information is very well acquainted with requirements and the idea behind, of course, legal framework. And just to be briefly to add, would like to highlight importance of the role of customs office, because from them we are gaining data about import and export of the substances itself and the goods containing them. So what we have done for the NIP update, we have sent from my ministry, which is focal point institution for the Stockholm Convention, we sent one letter to the custom office, and we kindly requested the person to be nominated on their behalf as contact person from the custom office, so that because it's also a lot of job on their side and they have to coordinate a lot of things. So for instance, now we will need 32, we have 32 custom tariff codes from the year 2021 up to now. It's also a lot of job to them, and they need someone over there to coordinate. So maybe one idea, and I agreed with my superiors that it's important to have, like we have, for instance, for Montreal Protocol on substances, that the depleted ozone layer, which also have trade provision, that it's important to have also person nominated from custom ops. So we hope that we will get someone who is enthusiastic. And thank you. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you so much for adding that important stakeholders addition, custom office, and the contact person, especially because of the code that has been growing, and then that is not possible to have only a limited or even dedicated person to look after this. And thank you so much. And I think Anastasia would like to add something before we move on to the next discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight some of the comments on the chat which were made earlier on the stakeholders map, that maps are very important for the inventories, and you have to keep the stakeholders on this stakeholder map always informed. But also another, like Katka mentioned, another equally high importance is that those maps and contexts are used repeatedly and regularly. And in some instances, these key stakeholders, they are part of the national coordination mechanisms for the POPs management. And some countries, they have a mechanism to collect information for Article 15 report. And we see a comment from Jordana that I forgot to mention the farmers and their associations to be included in the stakeholders list, especially in regards to unintentional production, so UPOPs, I believe. Thank you very much. And shall we move to the other poll, Stephanie?
Yes.
Okay, let me launch the next poll, and I hope you can see the question. So
Yes.
the question is, what can be seen by national government as drivers of change to get the appropriate level of stakeholders' input? So what could be the driver of change? Or what could actually potentially affect or improve the stakeholders' engagement? So again, as we mentioned today during our session, enabling policies and the legislative frameworks, or probably behavioral change through greater education and awareness, because a couple of countries mentioned about integration of some program in the curriculum in the educational institutions, or green and sustainable chemistry education and innovation, strong coordination across government agencies, or regular and open access communication with all relevant stakeholders is so far indicated by already 2 participants, and information clarity and transparency from the government to gain stakeholders' trust, and free access to information to all the parties. Also, financial mechanism or consumer or public demand, or maybe some others. Please feel free to add this to the chat. So what can be seen by national government as the drivers of change to improve the stakeholder engagement? Policies so far, 33%. Okay, 67% of participants believe that it's green and sustainable chemistry education. 88% of participants believe that it's regular and open communication with all stakeholders. Again, it's quite changing, but regular and open access communication with all stakeholders is one of the major responses today. And maybe we may wait a bit and stop the poll. What do you think, Stephanie?
Yeah, I think it's kind of clear here, because the highest here you can see the regular and open access communication with all required stakeholders, and it has been mentioned by our colleagues from Bosnia-Herzegovina, from Cameroon, and it's pretty obvious that we need a regular check and recheck and exchange of information, and also mentioned by our colleague from Macedonia, that basically we need to aggregate all the questions from the outset. So we need to go deeper as the stages move along. So it's obvious that we need to have an open access of communication at all times. And so we don't miss the momentum. And then it's not a one-off efforts, and then it's all in stages. And I think there is also input from Katka on the chat that we need to have an engagement outreach targeted to different stages and activities. What is it that we need to do for each stage? And it's probably different from one step to the other. And the last one, implementation, is most tricky indeed. And it's then we can see, I will probably close the poll, and so that we can see the result. We have next, most important here is the strong coordination across government agencies, and also financing mechanisms. So these are the top. And of course, we cannot forget the legislation, because without legislation, there's something missing. There's a gap that we won't be able to move forward without. And there has to be a binding, and there is a responsibility to fulfill. So I guess this is pretty clear from the message from today. I guess we can move to the next poll.
Yes, sure. I hope you can see my screen, and the question is on the screen. So who are the stakeholders you would expect to participate? And we have discussed this quite a lot before, earlier than we launched this poll, but we'll really appreciate once again your inputs. Who are the stakeholders who you would expect to participate in NIPS update and review process? And among the potential answers is national government, including coordinating ministries, industry, including business association and SMEs, NGOs, local authorities, academic institutions, scientists, academia, science community, and others. And we had the whole list of additional stakeholders to be included in the chat, I believe, today. So we'll appreciate your inputs here, as this results of this poll will also be would be included in the strategy. Yes, and Katka mentioned as the others, it means customs, scientific office, and associations, including agriculture, industry, and others. Great, that's good. And okay, that's a very interesting comment from Slavianka, maybe to think how to approach the stakeholders per sectors, because we have lately introduced the stakeholder, the sectoral approach to POPs inventories by Roland Weber in our previous webinars. I believe it was on the 1st of August. And we're actually preparing a couple of brochures on the stakeholders available in these sectors. So they will be coming, I hope, end of August or September. So we try to consider the whole life cycle of the POPs in these three sectors and what kind of stakeholders can be considered. So as much as possible, we try to provide the details on the stakeholder list. So these brochures will come quite soon, and we hope that will be helpful. And I can see messages from Katka. Scientific office should also, it should have been statistical office. Okay, statistical offices. Yes. That's great. Over to you, Stephanie, for the next poll.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me just end this poll and share the results. And we have 13 people answering this here. And these are all very important. And there are others that were also mentioned earlier from the Chamber of Commerce, from the custom, and then the statistical office, and of course the audience as well. The public awareness is actually should go on top first and foremost, so people can understand what it is. And good to hear all these inputs. So we can move on to the next poll. And I would like to hear more also if there is other inputs or suggestions from our colleagues. Let's see what's the next question.
Shall I launch the poll, Stephanie?
Yes, please.
Okay, and I believe the poll is not yet ended. Okay.
It's already, I think. Okay.
It's coming. Great. So the question should be on the screen. And what are currently existing modalities or methods to communicate and interact with relevant stakeholders during the inventory process? So we know that people normally approach the stakeholders through the surveys. There are specific survey forms and some examples of the questionnaires proposed by our colleagues in UNEP. So every guidance document in the annexes, they do have this proposed forms. And there also probably could be some workshops in the beginning of the inventory or in after the inventory process as well. So among the answers, awareness campaign for industry-specific stakeholders, workshop and capacity building with relevant stakeholders, regular stakeholders consultations, survey or a questionnaire for data collection and inputs, stakeholder feedback section, and creation of working groups, technical advisory groups, and information dissemination and standardized reporting formats. So please feel free to answer the questions. And okay, we have 7 participants. And in the meantime, I'm reading the comments on the chat regarding the sectors. There is a suggestion, there is a comment from Katka. I would agree if the sectoral approach to stakeholders is applied for gathering information, but for implementation, the sectoral approach may not be the most useful one. And I believe there are a couple of POPs that are actually not covered by the sectoral approach per se, so it would be really good to consider this as well. And yes, during the implementation, the sectoral approach to stakeholders is probably not the most useful. And Slavianka mentioned in our country, the local authorities could provide data and information about some waste streams containing PBTs. Stephanie, I believe we can share results of the poll. If you could help with this, because my screen is frozen.
Yeah, so I just ended the poll and we've got 13 answers. I see, and there's a hand raised from Jean-Pierre, but let me just go through this one in a moment. So first, workshop and capacity building with relevant stakeholders topped the polling answer. And good to hear that basically that is available for most of the countries participating here. And then it's followed by the creation of working groups, as it was also mentioned earlier by Maya from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it was also mentioned in our previous two groups. They also organized steering committee, technical working groups, so to make sure that there are people who are really dedicated to make sure there is a right input to execute and coordinate. And there is also announced regular stakeholder consultation, and we heard it several times today, the importance of participating in meetings to make sure that there's a regular meeting and catch up with the right sectors and who are, depending on which POP, who is going to be participating. And that is also very insightful. And then a survey or questionnaire for data collection and inputs, with the note that it has to be clear, straightforward, and simplified, rather than winding and put people off and not providing the right and accurate data. And I guess these are all the four tops answer. And awareness campaign for industry-specific stakeholders. And there will be another polling later on that particularly focus on the media consumption, trying to refer to the public awareness. But before we go to that polling, I would like to give the floor to our colleague, Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre, I don't know if you are there, if you would like to share your perspective. Jean-Pierre, yeah. I think you were just muted again. Okay. We cannot hear you, I'm afraid. You were unmuted for a bit, and then now you are muted again. Jean-Pierre, are you there?
I'm here, but I have a problem of my connection.
Okay. We can hear you. No, we lost you again.
Or we might get back to Zambia a little bit later in the end of the session once the audio issue is fixed. So we could probably move to the next poll and then get back to Zambia again.
Sounds good.
Okay, then let me launch the last poll, and I hope you can see the question on the screen. And the last poll is about the public awareness and communicating the POPs information to the general public, so usual people who probably less likely be aware about the POPs. So what are the communication channels used in your country to share information about chemicals, POPs pollution with the general public? And this was the part of information that was quite hard to find for all of the countries in our project. We have 32. So newspapers, television, social media channels of the public agencies, social media of influencers, website of public agencies, radio, which is quite in use these days, and schools and educational institutions. Maybe it could be a curriculum integrated in the schools, or probably just some lessons or some campaigns in the schools and educational institutions, community events, and others. So this is the first question, and please feel free to answer this question in the poll. We don't have any participants yet. I believe the questions are active and it's possible to participate. We hope. And the next question is about the frequency of using all of these sources, all of this media. So how often do you communicate the POPs information through the newspapers? How often do you communicate this POPs information through television, through social media of public agencies? These days, some of the ministries, they do run their Instagram accounts and they have their Twitter accounts, and they try to communicate or outreach to general public through the social media. Also, in some of our consultations with other groups, there was such answer as social media of influencers. That was very interesting. Websites of public agencies, radio, because not all of the regions have good internet penetration, especially for the countries with a very complicated geographic location, especially for the islands. Radio is also the case, and schools again, and community events. Okay, we have 2 participants out of the whole list so far. What are the communication channels used in the country to share information? And I'm just trying to recall, and we were talking about this in our previous sessions, that in my memory, in my country, we've never heard about POPs. I do not remember from my experience hearing about this. And for sure, television airtime is quite expensive. So governments would not go for the television unless it's a matter of huge pollution. But newspapers probably and social media channels could be the case in these days, and the radio and websites, when people normally have a couple of mobile devices. And we've been actually researching the levels of internet penetration in every country and how many devices people do have to provide you with the statistics as well. So that will be included in the strategies. So we have 7 responses here, and it will be really great to complete this with a higher response rate. That will be really helpful for us to shape the part in the strategy which will be dedicated to public awareness campaigns. And I believe Stephanie is preparing some of the key messages that would also go to the strategy itself.
Yes, so I will include a list of key messaging, especially that can be tailored for this public awareness campaign, and all the communication materials. So what is it that we can plug in, especially the wider perspective of POPs, or actually POPs might, as you said, Anastasia, POPs is not very familiar to some of us, and especially the layman terms, and what people are more aware of is forever chemicals. So because that is more catchy, that is the language that is often used by the media. So that is okay, forever chemicals, it will never disappear. So only that will capture their interest and their attention, and especially because it affects their health, that affects their loved ones' health. So only then, and that we speak their language and their channels, and really using the channel of communication, the highest communication channel penetration, only then we are trying, because it was also mentioned by Cameroon, our colleague, that basically it is quite difficult to make them being attentive, to make sure they listen to what is the message being behind that, and maybe to that the attention span is shorter and shorter these days, and how do we really go around about that? So I think that it's really something that we really have to bear in mind.
Okay, I think we have 12 responses, but I have seen the comment from Katka that we have quite many questions here on this section of the post because we're trying to evaluate the frequency of engaging through every channel, especially in regards to communicating the POPs information. So it takes time for participants to respond. And indeed, as you mentioned, Stephanie, I think the public awareness is one of the hardest because the effect of the POPs on human health are not really, the pollution itself is not vivid to human eyes, and also the exposure to the POPs is not really well understood. So people do not feel it. They don't have the pain directly. They cannot really associate these risks right away. So it's quite hard. And I see we have a hand from Jordana. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you. In my opinion, this is a very sensitive subject. You don't want to create panic. You don't want to, but you do want the attention. In order to gain the attention, the elaboration, the justification of our actions has to be very clear and very, very well, almost scientifically elaborated, but then again in a language that is understandable by the public. So this complex approach cannot be, in my opinion, again, cannot be channeled through social media, because social media, you have short messages, which tend to be not accurate always. Therefore, I have checked newspapers, television, communication through the schools, etc. The approach requires time. Thank you.
That is a very good message, Jordana, and I think we all agree that it's a very sensitive information, even with one piece of information missing that can create misinformation, disinformation, and people might be led to a different conclusion. So I think you are right about packaging the way we convey the information properly. And even if we use a social network, that cannot be just cut into one piece, but it has to be very clear. And then it's probably a series of messages. So it really has to be depending on how we shape it in a package, because at the same time, we don't really want to miss the opportunity to not to use a channel where, especially the youth, we're talking about between the 14 or 12 to 35 years old age span, that most of the time are glued to their mobile, no longer TV, YouTube perhaps, but because in some countries they are much more easily accessible and much more consumed in comparison to, of course, print. Newspaper is ideal because, of course, we can read everything with the right references, with accuracy, and it's official. But these days, the digital transformation has shifted our media landscape, and it's really tricky, even with lots of different news. Misinformation really is a problem. So we cannot really risk to have such challenge. So we really have to think about how to package it and to strategize in a way that the country will convey that information through various different channels. Thank you so much for this input. Anastasia, I think we can look at this and the outreach, the public awareness campaign, and how to really use which channel, what is the highest, and we can see websites of public agencies is at the top, because of course through this people believe that is the official information. There is no misinformation. People can always look at the right references from the country, from the authority, and then it's also followed by the social media channels of the public agency. So this is probably one thing to address, that basically all information should come from the legit recommendation from the authority, cannot be from, when we're talking about influencers can come from so many different perspectives, right? So this can be misused at times. So having the official name and official authority is a mandatory in this regard. And it's then followed by the television, and there are still a high consumption rate for television. It can be a satellite, it can be digital, so depending on the landscape of the media of each countries. So I guess these are all the top, and there is also community events. Actually, community events is really important, and especially because lots of society will use the word of mouth and the people that they trust as the source of information. So I guess this is also something that we can look at in organizing different events, not just through the indirect channel for communication, but also the engagement in person. Thank you so much for everyone who's providing your input. I think we are good with the poll. This is our last poll, and I don't know if Jean-Pierre is still there to share the perspective, if he manages to solve the connection issue. If not, I think
he's not on the list, I believe.
Okay.
Not
So maybe
yet.
we can invite him later by email to share his perspective that can be included into the minutes if possible.
Sure. And as also on the chat, we can see the response, the comment that maybe interviews with experts on the social media explaining in more detail the topic would actually help to raise the awareness without actually contributing to raising the panic among the people. And that's actually very important to have some trusted sources and trusted people and experts in this area to speak about this or elaborate on this topic rather than social media influencers. That's really important.
Okay, I think we're good for today. I don't know if there's anyone who would like to share the experience again. If not, then I think we can conclude today's session.
Yeah, and on behalf of GGKP, let us express our deep gratitude for all of the participants. It was a very engaging discussion, and it was really great to see you all for the first of over the long time. Really happy to see all the faces on the screen, and we are very glad to have you today. Thank you to the regional executing agencies for your facilitation and coordination and inviting all these people today. That's amazing. And from our end, once again, thank you to Suman from Secretariat. Many thanks for your participation. And thanks to Stephanie and all our interpreters who supported this session. And we will circulate the meeting minutes with you by the email quite soon and share the results. Thank you very much. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
Have
you,
a nice
everyone.
weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.